China has appointed a new international trade negotiator following the outbreak of a devastating tariff war between Beijing and Washington.
To Donald Trump's trade war now, and China has called on the United States to cancel all tariffs after Washington announced exemptions for some consumer electronics.
President Xi Jinping on Friday urged the EU to join China in defending globalization and opposing unilateral acts of bullying.
Which brings us to Europe. They were bracing for a full-blown trade war, but then Trump hit the brakes. The tariffs are on hold for 90 days. So Europe is now in a limbo. They have 89 days to strategize. What is their game plan?
The European economy stands as one of the world's largest trading blocs and a formidable market force in its own right. However, recent developments have sparked concerns across the continent. Allegations are mounting that China, in response to escalating tariff wars, is inundating Europe with a surge of inexpensive goods. As the United States tightens its trade barriers, Beijing appears to be redirecting its surplus export capacity towards Europe, flooding the market with low-cost products. This influx has put European manufacturers and retailers on high alert. Some critics describe it as China's dumping strategy, while others warn that it could gradually erode Europe's industrial base. Europe prides itself on rigorous trade standards, emphasizing quality, safety, and durability. Meanwhile, China, a global production powerhouse, continues to dominate markets with its scale and affordability. But Europe is not an easy market to conquer. Can the European Union withstand this flood of cheap goods? Or is China finally hitting a wall? Before we explore further, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Turn on notifications and hit the like button to stay informed on the latest global developments. Let's now examine the data, facts, and political context behind this unfolding economic drama. According to the latest figures from Eurostat, from Q4 2024 to Q1 2025, EU imports from China rose by 6%, while exports to China fell by 3%. Although China has long been one of the EU's primary trade partners, the gap in trade balance has widened significantly since the United States imposed heavy tariffs on Chinese goods. Recent estimates show a sharp rise, nearly 10%, in the market share of Chinese textiles and electronics within the EU. This puts enormous pressure on domestic producers, especially in France, Germany, and Italy, where industries like textiles, footwear, and even household appliances struggle to compete on price. The issue of dumping, selling goods below production cost, is now under scrutiny by EU watchdogs. Some UK retailers argue that loopholes in trade regulations, like low taxes on low-value parcels, unfairly benefit Chinese exporters. They call it nothing short of unfair competition and are urging authorities to introduce stricter regulations. At the heart of the issue lies a stark reality. The tariffs imposed by the U.S. have made it difficult for Chinese manufacturers to access American markets. To offset this, they have redirected surplus goods to Europe, a market with high purchasing power. But such a sudden redirection has raised suspicions of deliberate dumping. What is dumping? It refers to the practice of selling product abroad at prices lower than their normal value in the domestic market, often even at a loss, in order to gain a foothold by undercutting local competition. EU officials suspect that China is doing just that in key sectors. China denies the accusation, insisting that its low prices stem from efficient production and supply chains, not foul play. Beijing argues that the shifting trade flows are a natural outcome of post-pandemic global supply chain restructuring. Despite China's assurances, concern is rising in sectors like furniture, electronics, toys, and textiles. UK retailers have pointed out stark examples. Products selling online in Europe for €105 are available from Chinese sellers for just €34, including shipping. While tax exemptions partly explain the discrepancy, the suspected dumping makes the situation more alarming. The European Commission is investigating the matter and may impose anti-dumping duties, additional tariffs on Chinese goods, to counteract unfair pricing. Similar actions have been taken in the past in steel and solar panel sectors. Now, shoes, toys, and small appliances may soon follow. Of course, Beijing has reacted strongly to such measures, accusing the EU of protectionism. But voices from within Europe are growing louder, particularly from Italy, Spain, and Portugal, where small businesses are struggling to survive. And here lies a dilemma: protect domestic industry or keep prices low for struggling consumers. Inflation and economic uncertainty are driving European buyers toward cheaper products. But if local industries collapse under the weight of cheap imports, the long-term impact could be devastating: job losses, reduced production, and even higher prices as competition disappears. The U.S., meanwhile, has maintained its hard-line stance against China since the Trump era. Those unresolved tariffs have nudged China toward Europe, and with Beijing's vast manufacturing capacity far exceeding domestic demand, exports remain vital to its economic model. But the EU is divided. France and Germany advocate strict measures, while Nordic and Eastern European states push for a more flexible stance, especially those benefiting from cheap Chinese imports. EU's complex policymaking structure further complicates swift action. British retailers and manufacturers in France and Germany are lobbying hard for urgent intervention. Even rumors suggest that an emergency EU workshop has been held on the matter, though no decisions have yet been made. If more anti-dumping duties are enforced, prices in Europe could rise, adding another layer of strain to inflationary pressures. Meanwhile, China could retaliate by restricting imports from Europe, especially industrial goods, machinery, automobiles, and luxury items that are vital to German and French exports. This isn't just an economic challenge. It's a geopolitical chess game. China is strengthening its Belt and Road Initiative links with Central and Eastern European countries, offering loans and investments in exchange for softer trade policies. If the EU imposes tough restrictions, Beijing may divert its resources away from these regions, potentially creating political rifts within the bloc. Recent trade data highlights the gravity of the situation. In categories like textiles, toys, footwear, and home appliances, Chinese imports to the EU have increased by 12 to 15% over the past 6 months, while local production has declined by 5 to 7%. Even without dumping, the pricing gap is immense, and European producers are struggling to keep up. Local chambers of commerce are pleading with the EU. Close the tax loopholes, investigate dumping practices, and offer our producers a lifeline. Small-scale businesses in Italy and Spain, still recovering from the pandemic, fear bankruptcy is imminent. So, can Europe respond with an emergency action plan? While formal decisions are pending, we may soon witness a surge in anti-dumping investigations, possibly igniting a new trade war. Europe risks alienating China, but may have no choice if domestic industries continue to suffer. And that brings us to the bigger question: how will China respond? Will the CCP maintain its grip on European markets, or will resistance from the EU force it to rethink its strategy? In the grand scheme, the U.S.-triggered tariff war has spilled over into Europe. China, cut off from American markets, is eyeing Europe as the next best alternative. But whether the EU can defend its industrial base without alienating consumers or provoking a deeper conflict with China remains to be seen. To conclude, tariff war backs China into a corner. CCP's dumping of goods in Europe faces strong resistance is not just a headline. It's a window into a complex global crisis where economic survival, political alliances, and consumer realities collide. So, what do you think? Is China truly dumping? Or is this just free market capitalism at play?